right, hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of the Roundtable. I'm here in San Francisco as always, and joining me, a little under the weather, but here nonetheless, is Spellsy.
Hello.
And in Santa Monica, bespectacled Travis Gafford.
Honey, you seem a little tired. Are you under the weather too?
No, but I'm under a sweater this week, so maybe that's what you're thinking of. Anyway, so we've got NA expansion recap, a slight, brief, quick look ahead to I Am Cologne, and then this is our end-of-year spectacular episode, so we're just going to talk a little bit about everything that's happened this year, best moments, things we liked, things we didn't like, whatever we think of, and we'll just kind of go from there. So, Travis, NA expansion over the weekend, you were there in person. We saw what is currently still being called Curse Academy and what will probably be called something else shortly advance out along with Team Coast, maybe fan unfavorite Team Coast. Big takeaways from the weekend. What was it like there in person?
It was pretty cool. There wasn't that big of a turnout on Friday, but Saturday and Sunday had bigger turnouts. First time up at the ESL studios, and as much crap as people like to give ESL, I thought that, at least from what I could tell, I wasn't watching obviously at home, but it was a pretty good produced tournament. In terms of the actual stuff that happened there, I think that there were some surprises. Certainly people did not... Everyone told me that Curse Academy was going to go down in flames, and from what I understand, that's the way they were saying it was supposed to go as well, because they had almost broken up a week before and all that kind of thing. So, very fascinating to see them do so well. And then, obviously, Fusion just seemed to buckle under the pressure, and Coast was able to get through. So, congratulations to Curse and Coast. And then, yeah, I mean, I think it was just kind of surprising how close a lot of the series were and that kind of thing. I don't know how much you guys caught at home, but it was surprising to me.
I watched a decent amount, and I thought it was interesting to see these teams. I also didn't think Curse Academy was going to do that well, but they kind of crushed. I think they were definitely by far the best team, and Fusion and Coast kind of duked it out for that last spot and barely came through. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of 3-2 comebacks in that weekend, actually.
Yeah, I think that's the trend we saw even in playoffs going last year. I don't know exactly what to attribute that to, but it does seem that teams have a really hard time closing out series. I don't know if that's just a momentum thing or a fielding in the air or sort of a natural kind of tilt, panicky nerve situation, but once a team starts coming back, it seems really very difficult for that team that was ahead to kind of get that clinching win.
I think it happens even more in the challenger scene where they're more inconsistent, I guess.
Yeah. So 2 teams advance. Any hope for those teams as they head now into the grind next year? Do either of these look like they have a chance for a top 3, top 5? Anything other than the relegation tournament following spring split?
I mean, who knows? Because we have a lot of open spots still on North America. They could, Curse Academy looked decent. But I still think it's going to be tough for them to take down any of the top 4.
Right. Travis, any faith in these teams? Does anyone look like they're about to Cloud9 their way through the NALCS?
No.
No. Okay. So moving on, I think one really interesting story coming out of this is, though, and this has sort of nearly happened a bunch of different times now in NACLs, but it has actually happened. Curse Academy, or Curse organization, now, for the moment, owns 2 LCS teams and will be forced to sell. Travis, I know you talked to Liquid about that a bunch of different times. What's sort of the timeline? What's the process from here?
Yeah, I think that, I spoke with both Liquid and a couple writers, tried to get sort of a feel for how this goes down, and I think right now, because this is the very first time that this has ever happened, the sense I get is that it's kind of like everyone figuring out sort of how this is supposed to work, because it's kind of unclear, especially with the fact that the holidays are happening, this is a pretty big business transaction, what the timelines are on all this different stuff. So I'm pretty curious to see what'll happen, but yeah, it's going to be incredibly fascinating. I'm trying to get Liquid to make the sale public in terms of how much it'll cost.
Yeah.
So I think that would be really fascinating, because no one really knows what the value of an LCS team or LCS spot is. And I don't know, there's a whole lot of this. It poses a ton of interesting questions, and I hope that we get enough answers to all of those.
Certainly in traditional sports, you tend to get the sale price. I think we're all very curious about that, because you've heard over the years, $20,000 for an LCS team or $40,000 for an LCS team? Has that gone up tremendously? Especially as you know, sort of there have been arguments that like TSM and Cloud9 and more teams should get into this. Is that an actual viable business?
Yeah, I mean, who knows? I would not like to see not only like the purchase price, but also like kind of the cost of investment, like because they're housing a few of the people and they're putting in significant resources. Everybody on Reddit saying how like Chris is one of the best well-managed teams or whatever because they have such a visible support staff.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, but I'm also wondering, since I don't really care that much about the business side of things, I'm curious of your guys' opinions on, do you think an esports already like kind of known esports brand will pick them up, or will it be like a unseen new like?
I expect, and this is based on sort of the lack of bidding or seeming sale of Team 8, that the brands that have wanted to get into League at whatever the price is for an LCS team can get in if they want to.
Isn't Team 8 an established brand?
I don't think Team 8 is an established brand.
Oh, okay.
I don't think so.
But anyway,
well, I could be wrong.
There was a
Correct us if
movie
we're
a
wrong in
while
the
back
comments
called
below.
Super 8 that did not do very well.
There was 8 Mile. I'm familiar with that.
Oh,
Yeah.
wait, I think that's the
I think
same
that's-
people.
Yeah,
Same people.
it's Eminem.
Anyway,
Yeah.
it's funny because I have the opposite attitude of you, Hunter. I suspect that this will sell much higher than people are expecting with no insider knowledge or anything like that. But I think that it'll sell much higher than people are expecting just because I think that what we're seeing right now is a bit of a mini China situation where a lot of the people who are getting these teams or have these teams are people that come from money. And so I think that Steve or Liquid will sell it to a person, maybe somebody who's like a son of, like, this is something that's very common. It's like a son of a wealthy family or something like that picks this up as like his business venture, something along those lines. And so I think that the numbers that he'll be getting from non-established brands or non-established people will be much higher than something like a Navi or along those lines.
That's what I just said. I don't know who you're disagreeing with, but that's what I just
I thought
said.
you were just saying that the brands who wanted to get in can afford to do it. And
No,
just have.
I was saying the reverse. I think that the brands wanted to get in. Team 8 has just been sitting there, much like Super Hot Crew last year, just sitting there, available for purchase. You know, if you were Navi or something and you wanted to get in, you could have done that. The fact that nobody has means I think that it will be an outsider coming in who, for whatever reason, sees this as the venture to get in on, maybe because it's more established or more experienced or whatever. For the
I just don't know if
players,
they can afford to get in.
well, we'll see. That's, again, we want to know the purchase price. For the players, if you were a Curse Academy player who was part of this major organization and are now going to get potentially a sort of newbie owner who has maybe no real experience with doing this, is that fair? Is this a reasonable thing? Would you be mad at, I mean, you knew sort of what you were getting into, but still, don't you want to have some sort of voice or opinion or feedback on who your new owner will be?
Yeah, I think in Travis's interview with Liquid, like, or with Saint at least, where Saint was like reassuring, like, oh yeah, Liquid has our back, but like, if you're looking like for all the possibilities, like it could easily be some businessman or somebody who's like
Right.
doesn't have their back and just like sells them off to the highest bidder.
It
and,
is business.
and doesn't have like those stipulations like, oh, they must already have a house, or they like
Right.
these other like stipulations that Liquid might just put in for kindness.
Right. Travis, what do you think Liquid is going to maybe enforce or look for in a potential buyer? How much esports experience should that person have, or anything like that? Detailed plans, knowledge?
Yeah, he said that he has a set of guidelines in terms of this is where starting salaries need to be for the players. This is, like where they should be, what kind of housing situation needs to be in place or whatever. So I think anybody who is interested in purchasing has to meet certain guidelines that he has set up for like the well-being and welfare of the team. Because I also don't think that it is in his interest for there to be news that comes out that's like Liquid decided to sell it to some sketchy person who's just gonna
Right.
abuse
And that's
them.
all, but that's all well and good while he has time to like look at different buyers and pick one and whatever. But at some point, he's going to run out of time and has to sell the thing to somebody else. He may like kind of Alex Garfield it to his neighbor or brother or something, but at some point he has to get out no matter what, and that probably means taking the best deal on the table, whether that's a actually good deal for his players or not.
Potentially, I mean, I think he will still, knowing the guy, I think that he'll still want to make sure, like, I think if there were two deals, one of them was better for the players and one of them was better for him, he would probably go with the one that's better for the players.
Well, I guess we'll find out. It'll be. I hope we get a lot of transparency. So Liquid's been far more transparent than other people have been during sales, so I hope that'll continue. That's definitely a credit to him, and I think helpful for the entire industry to get a sense of like where we are as a business, as an industry, all of that kind of stuff.
And by the way, I tweeted this, but I'm very proud of that guy because, and I think he should be proud as well because lots of other people, and I don't fault them for this, had challenger teams and then didn't continue with them or whatever. It's very unstable and like a very tough business without very much reward, but he stuck with it, and now obviously he'll probably reap the rewards of that. But
I mean, I guess we'll see. That again goes back to purchase price. He will reap the rewards at least on terms of influence in the industry because he has this second team, and that kind of thing. Hopefully, it was worth it financially. So
yeah.
All right, so moving on, 2 teams fail, Final 5, and Fusion, we'll see them in the Challenger Series upcoming. There was a little news announced about that'll be more of a formal tournament coming up, not the kind of, or a formal league, not the sort of confusing and vague tournament structure where teams were entering all the different times, so it's impossible to tell where you are. Fusion, which had foreign players, tweeted that McNoon and people will be sticking around, so they get another chance, and we'll look ahead to that. I think personally it's a great move for the Challenger Series to become an actual league that looks a lot more like the LCS. I don't know how much we have to say beyond that, but it was nice to see that is leveling up, as Ryan
Well, I was just
said.
going to say, I think it did slip by a little bit. But I actually agree with you a lot that it'll be a lot better because one of the problems is that if you don't follow the Challenger League, like I would have this problem where I didn't really follow the Challenger League. I was at LCS every week and then would drive home afterwards and not catching any games. And it was really hard to get a sense, like whenever it came time for them to come to the studio and compete, it's like, okay, who's the stronger team?
Right.
Whereas now with like a league format, you're like, these guys are undefeated.
Right.
Like, that'll look a lot... it'll be a lot easier, I think, for people to understand the strength of teams.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice. I think one interesting thing, though, that you talked about is kind of whether it'll increase stability and, like, what should happen to these teams. Like, I don't know, like, a lot of, like, tweets are saying, like, oh, man, they better stay all together, like, and, like, everybody, like, Challenger is, like, just as good or whatever, you know what I mean? I have a feeling it might not increase the instability as much as people might think, even though it's kind of like more regular kind of action. But hopefully it'll raise up like the Challenger scene and make it more visible.
Yeah. It seems like it would help just to have more consistent teams playing week after week. It's easier to get to know the personalities and that, which is one of the big problems that we've seen documented by various journalists over the years is that who are these people? I have no idea. Even when they're getting poached later and you're like, oh, that guy was in the Challenger scene. He was good?
Yeah.
Okay, moving on, I Am Cologne this upcoming weekend. Traveling over there from NA is new CLG and new Dignitas and their new lineups, and they will be meeting their new Rocket and new Gambit. So 4 familiar teams with a lot of different players and setup, and they're being joined by 2 kind of rest of world teams that are coming in. Travis, any way to predict what we're going to see there with all of these different lineups coming together and playing for the first time?
I mean, you can certainly predict in terms of, I just feel like this is the better lineup. Like I think somebody like Thorin would probably look at this and say, like, okay, well, here's how Smithy fit into teams in the past, and maybe he'll be good here, and here's like the problem with all that.
But he's not even going to be there.
What's that?
He's not there.
I know. I'm just talking about the new lineup.
Oh yeah, for example.
Yeah. So I was referencing the Smithy video that he did.
Oh yeah, right.
Talking about.
Right. Friend of the show, Thorin.
Yeah. So anyway, I think that you can do a lot of like that sort of theory crafting or whatever, but at the end of the day, it's really hard to tell, especially because I don't think that these teams or all of them will be at their full strength either, and it's hard to tell how much, how seriously they'll be taking this. So. It's impossible to tell. However, I do think that the tournament will be very interesting because of that exact reason. So whenever everything is up in the air, it'll make it really interesting. It just makes it hard for us to discuss before it happens.
What are you excited about then?
Well, I want to address Travis's opinion first. I think I agree with you that it's like pretty hard to tell, but I think that there is like some kind of like predictions you can do. Like I think Gambit will not be that good with their new lineup. I mean, like, that's probably not like a surprise. But I also think Rocket might be like, Rocket I think is like the deceptive team that has like a lot of things going for them in my opinion. Like if Ryu actually works out, like they might have like the strongest upgrades out of any LCS team even.
Yeah.
So I think that'll be actually interesting to watch, see if it pans out. Like, and I think that they're probably the favorites.
Yeah, I would think so. They have Woolite single-handedly carried my fantasy team all last year. There's no way he won't be better on a better team. So I think they seem to be the strongest going in, but it is very wide open right now.
Yeah, there's definitely like way more roster changes or whatever, and so like it's kind of up in there. And then Dignitas and CLG, I don't know. They're both are like I kind of think Dignitas might be better than CLG, but who knows?
Who knows? Okay, yeah. So and we'll see. It's another. They're on 421. So sort of Warwick nerfs have come in, and some big balance stuff has come around. So we'll see.
I think Kalista is unlocked.
No, they said disabled. I was excited because I thought Kalista would be unlocked, but they said disabled. So it's really, yeah, it sucks. Shame on Riot. So yeah. But anyway, it'll be interesting to see again this sort of new patch, new meta stuff evolve even more. We still got a taste of that at IEM San Jose. This is the next serious round of competition for at least for these two metas and see how they pan out. All right, so that's look ahead. Now this is our final episode of the year. It's we're putting this out. It'll be Friday right before Christmas next week, and then New Year's and stuff. So we're just kind of wrap up. Travis, I know we've been working internally on sort of an article, a look back on the year, kind of cheers and jeers, favorite moments, and that kind of stuff. Take us through. The article should be live, I think, when this comes out. So take us through that, and we'll kind of share our opinions on what's gone well and what has gone poorly this year.
Just wanted to point out that, or before I get into that, I just want to say that this is the last episode of the year.
Yes.
I wanted to make it, in the vein of past shows, a fun, lighthearted drinking episode.
Right.
Where we just all drink a little bit, but then the fun police, a.k.a. Hunter, came in here.
That's how it happened at all.
It was like Hunter was like, I was trying to convince him. He was like, no, and like we can't do this. We're a professional broadcast.
Yeah,
like,
let's move
on.
So I apologize, everyone, for the seriousness of this episode, but that's Hunter's fault. Anyway, so yeah, we've been working on this article called Cheers and Jeers. The idea is I think we're going to name it something like On Gamers 2014 Cheers and Jeers Riot Games, and then hopefully if people like this, give feedback. It should be over on the site when this goes live. We'll do it for some of the other things like teams or players or whatever. But so the idea is basically we're looking at like 5 big good things that Riot did and 5 unfortunate missteps they might have made, and sorting everything. So the big thing is, sorry, Hunter is pushing me along. I don't know if that'll get cut, but he's just doing this thing. Anyway, the big thing is that we are now down into the final voting, and the things that we're looking at Cheers are LOL Worlds Format, Challenger League, improved LCS Worlds Production New Studios, the Fantasy LCS, and then the Expansion Tournament. So we'll talk about those now and then get into Cheers in a second. But the thing that's leading right now is the LOL Worlds Format.
Yeah.
The thing that is behind is the Expansion and the Tournament. I don't even know why Fantasy LCS made this list.
Wow, that is cold.
I think, okay,
let's go one by one, because you're going to get crazy. If you want to start with Fantasy, that's fine.
Fantasy LCS for about 5 weeks, and then I got bored of it. So tell me why you guys think Fantasy LCS is a big deal.
Okay, so I think we've seen fantasy football have a profound impact on the culture and popularity of actual football. And I think Fantasy LCS is in position to do the exact same thing. It gives you something to do while you're watching the games and an extra level of engagement that's otherwise turns something that's relatively passive into something that's interactive. And for people who only follow one scene, it gives you a little insight and connection to players that are in another scene or on a team that you don't normally pay attention to. I am a big Woolite fan now, not because I watched a lot of his games necessarily, but because he was on my fantasy team, and somehow, even though they were losing every week, he was putting up big stats. I have a connection with him. I'm a fan now. That's a big deal. That's because what Riot struggles with is, okay, new teams come in. How do we connect fans to these new teams? How do we strengthen, get people to know their players, get to know the brands and the teams that are coming up? Fantasy is one way to do that because it gives you a connection to players and teams that you might not otherwise get.
Yeah, but in your example, Woolite has not become like the star of the EU LCS anymore. You're like, this guy won me a lot of points.
Yeah, but
that's okay.
That's
so
how
I know
it
his
affected
name.
him.
Yeah.
That's like an anecdote.
I have a personal connection to him that I wouldn't have had if I was just watching EU games. That's big.
And the reason why I like it is I think out of all of these things that you listed, like some of them were like kind of like no-brainers. Like, oh, like it's a nice iteration for the Worlds format to be better, and I think that like helped the Worlds a lot. That was like one of the big improvements over Worlds last year. But like that wasn't like a crazy new invention that they've been building for months or whatever. That's one reason why I think fantasy is like a significant part of this year. One of the sheer worthy things.
Surprised the community, and that nobody was expecting it middle of, in between splits, middle of the season. There are lots of things everybody wanted. Fantasy LCS might have been on the list, but it came out of nowhere, and I think kudos to Riot for sort of jumping ahead, like you were saying, not just iterating on things that are there, but really jumping ahead and producing something that people responded to very positively. So what I'm shocked about, Travis, but I think you probably haven't spent a lot of time playing traditional fantasy sports, is that you got so bored of it when you should be there thinking, I think the problem was your team sucked and you were losing, and so you just gave up because you were terrible. You know why? Because you picked all CLG people, and they did well in the beginning, and then they started losing, and your team was terrible, and that's why you don't like it. It's not our fault that you're bad at fantasy LCS, and therefore don't like the feature.
Okay, even given that, why should I? Okay, let's say that I had this. Let's say okay, yeah, I did have a good start, and then an unfortunate downturn.
Yeah.
I don't understand. What am I supposed to do? You guys already had all the best players.
No, you drop players and add players. I picked up Woolite off the scrap heap. He was totally like a little lost puppy in the garbage area, and I grabbed him and I took him, and then he grew into this big shining dog, and we sailed off to victory. So that's what you do. You have to play the roster game instead of just
maybe this is what's good because. All right, well, we should say, by the way, everybody seems to think the LO Worlds format might have been the best thing ever.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's much to say there. However, some of these other things are a little bit more, controversial.
I think kudos to Riot. Just to expand on that, I think kudos to Riot for giving us a better tournament format. No buys, I think, was really nice, so teams didn't get the instant out thing from not being able to play many games. And I think the best of fives, once you got out of the group stage, also just made for a better tournament overall.
Definitely.
Those are the parts that I resonate with. The moving around, all of that stuff, was nice, I guess, visually, but I didn't particularly care for the giant stadium and Imagine Dragons and whatever. But I think the format of the tournament led to a more exciting progression of games over a really long period of time.
Except with the one question mark of the wild card teams.
And then Kaboom beat Alliance, and it was all worth it. Boom.
All right.
So back to the 10-team expansion tournament, which is what I was about to bring up. Maybe Fantasy LCS will be much more interesting to me next year because when I started to lose, our league was big enough where I didn't see anybody that I could pick up that was interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe now that there's these extra 2 teams, which is, by the way, also on our list of cheers.
Yeah.
You think it's really strange that this is there.
I agree with you about the fantasy thing.
That's the most compelling argument I've heard yet for expanding to 10 teams.
Is because I think there's actually a little balance issue in the fantasy thing with the numbers they chose and specifically the team size and that kind of stuff, which led to the thing where you think you have no options.
Yes, a drought of possibilities.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, now we can talk about the
expansion.
Thing.
So here's my thing. So I think to prove that expansion is good, you have to demonstrate that there's enough talent that you're not diluting the talent pool and pulling everything down with these 2 new teams. And I just don't see that. I have never looked at promo relegations and thought, man, all of these teams are good. Why aren't they all in LCS? Normally what I think is all of these teams are not as good as the top teams. They should all not be in the LCS. Or, I don't really care which of them in. My fear is that we've added 2 more bad teams to the LCS instead of, which is just going to pull everything down. Instead of maybe what you'd hope is that the rosters are so stuffed, there's too much talent and we don't have enough teams for them to go on. We add 2 teams, the talent spreads out, and the overall quality went up.
See, I think NA LCS looked really good at the end of last year. What's that?
Go ahead.
Wait.
Especially because remember, EG started to have that good streak or whatever. I compare the 8 teams right now to the 8 teams we started off with in spring of 2013.
Yeah.
And I feel like everything's gotten a little bit more competitive, and it's kind of nice.
I mean, those 2 weeks, it looked good. Except EG was 4 and something going into that week, and complexity was like 5 and something going into it. Those teams were terrible all year.
Like,
I don't want to take too much away from those last 2 weeks, but they're, you know, like, those were not good teams relative to TSM, Cloud9, the top. Like, the gap between the top and the bottom was pretty significant.
Like,
and then EG stopped. Then EG stopped in relegations.
I don't think, and again, this is maybe a failure on my part from understanding like traditional sports stuff, but you're always going to have like the teams that aren't doing very well in the league, right? Like you're going to have like the Yankees up here, and then you're going to have like the other guys down there.
Yeah.
Sports. But anyway, the point is, that you don't need all the teams to be as good as TSM and Cloud9.
No.
You can have other teams that aren't.
But you don't want more velocities.
Yeah, that's...
Yeah, but I don't think we're going to get velocities.
I guess we'll find out. Team Coast, new velocity possibly. I mean, that's my fear. Anyway, the fear is that you just end up with more crap, not like better stuff.
Yeah. That's what he said in the first thing, I think.
That's why I didn't vote for it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's bad. I just don't think... I will withhold judgment and not say that it's good, just on its face. To add more teams, you could do that like to infinity. We should have 12 teams, 16 teams, 30 teams, 40 teams, 100 teams, you know.
Yeah.
I think the other thing is we needed a little bit of a mix-up. I am concerned about Europe, because I don't know how 2 more teams is going to help that area, but I think we just needed a little bit of a oomph for NALCS. Anyway,
I mean, I would rather drop teams than add teams, personally.
Whoa. Really?
Down to 6?
Down to 6.
Wow. I like it being a nice... 8 is a good number. So I think the other thing is that, like, you go to 6... And then how many playoff teams do you have? None? I mean, 2? You don't even do playoffs? Yeah. The nice part about going to 10 is that when you take 6 in, you really are leaving like 4 teams out.
Yeah.
You know, you hope that maybe you get a better playoffs out of this because you're not like sweeping in that kind of crappy last team.
The positives of the 10 teams is that you now have a better kind of like season thing. Like right now we've kind of felt like the season's kind of useless because almost everybody gets into the playoffs, except for the teams that obviously should not be in the playoffs. You know what I mean?
Right.
But now, like, there's like maybe like it'll be like more accessible from Challenger to LCS. There'll be more of like a fluid kind of motion there with the Challenger changes.
I think the 10 teams format works a lot better with Challenger being a league as well.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the one positives. I think those are the positives that it makes the playoffs more exciting and allows like Challenger.
That's fine.
But I think that the quality of the league, like the 10 weeks or 11 weeks that we spend with these teams, will be. I think my guess is that it'll be worse.
The average game is worse.
Just because you're putting in 2 teams that are average bad.
Right.
So then it'll take down the average.
That's my argument as well. What's next?
I think the average will still be the same because people are going to get better. Jeers. So we have the LCS UK announcement issues with Gambit getting their visas. A lack of visa. Actually, I just noticed 3 of these are lacks. Lack of visa enforcement. Lack of international tournaments, lack of Chinese analysts at Worlds, and the LOL Worlds fallout from miscommunicating the group stages. So that's the idea of like Korea getting super pissed off.
Yeah.
And I was actually very surprised. I said that the LOL Worlds fallout was the biggest failure of Riot Games this year because while it didn't affect me that much, like I understand that was huge over in Korea. Like huge. You had like government agencies like coming out and saying stuff. It was huge. Why are you doing that, Hunter?
Because
let's hear about how Hunter hates Koreans.
Yes, that's my argument. No, I just so what? Like, there's no lasting fallout from that. There's no like big problem. Everything's fine. So what? That was like a temporary blip, and the tournament went on, and everything was fine. Who cares? Like in the grand scheme of things, who cares? Who cares? Not me. And therefore, I did not vote for that as a serious cheer. Who cares? Nobody. That's my argument. Nobody.
Okay, but Hunter.
Yes.
I'm going to cheat and look at the spreadsheet right now.
Yes.
You voted for the LCS UK announcement of Gambit being the biggest issue.
Yeah, and I don't even think...
At the end of the day, aren't all these just temporary problems? Because you could say, like, oh yeah, the world goes on. Like, no. It's never going to do well anyway.
I think so. What I voted on consistently was what impacted the quality of the games that I was watching. So the fan experience, right? Like the stream viewer experience, because that's what most people are consuming. The Gambit thing, like, busted up a whole weekend's worth of games, at least for that team and the teams they were playing against. I think that was like a big problem. And for it to come on such like a crappy reason ultimately, like, well, communication problem or whatever, I think that's really just, it feels bad. It felt bad for everybody involved, for all of EU. It just felt bad that that's what happened. So that's what I care about, games. Koreans being upset didn't impact the games. The games were fine. The Gambit thing impacted games. And if we're not about the games, what are we about?
Spellsy, you had stuff you wanted to say.
I kind of agree. I think it's all about the games too, and I think that the Korean thing, while it was an outrage or whatever, I also am not like very sympathetic to outrages, but and it might have affected the fan experience of those people who are planning to go to group stages. But I think that in general, like, I think the quality of games matters, and the Gambit thing was one of the things that impacted the most.
I think there's a reason that you didn't have, you know, the owners of Riot come out and write like a letter about like the Gambit situation,
that's
whereas they did for Korea.
What's next? What's next?
You were affected.
What's next? What's next? Next.
Well, okay, so we talked about that. We should talk about this lack of visa enforcement, because there's a very good chance that right now it's leading in votes with only a couple people that still need to vote, and I think a lot of the community is going to be very confused by the fact that we vote this as our number one thing, if we do.
This one's
basically
easy argument. Easy argument.
I got it. Because Hunter's been saying every argument, right? So the argument is the visa thing affects the games.
Yes, the most games of any of those issues. Every time, like, Bjergsen goes home for a week, Snoopy, Crepo, whatever, all these people have to go home. CLG, like both say, completely, you know, non-viable, like, celebrity roster for a full weekend. Like, lack of enforcement. Riot not saying you need a legit visa to be here so that you don't have to go home and reset your tourist visa in the middle of the season. Busted up tons of games all season. So, and that, like, maybe it was exciting, go Chaos or whatever. Like, no, I think that was really bad for the competitive integrity of the league to have all these games being basically forfeit or, like, greatly affected by one person being missing.
See, I would agree with it being a competitive integrity thing, but I think it's more because, like, you know, like, they made this rule around the fact that it had to be, like, a visa thing or whatever, and then they just kind of ignored the whole thing. I think it's less about the games and more about, I mean, I think it is a little bit about the games in the sense that obviously there was like Fallout where you had like these celebrity things because Seraph had to go and all this stuff, but I don't know. It's strange because I kind of understand why they did it. I mean, I completely understand why they did it, but I think the problem is that they started off by allowing. You okay, Spellsy?
Yeah.
You good? Okay. They started off by. I just wanted to check it.
I don't think they hear me.
Safety first.
Allowing, you know, like, oh, okay, like these guys don't have their visas or something. I think the rumor was that the EG players that came over, the Europeans didn't have their visas and stuff like that, and so they were like, okay, well, we'll get this sorted out later on, and then it just more and more players started moving around, and it just became like a huge issue for them. So
yeah, everything was in a weird limbo, and then people would just go missing, and we'd all have to pretend like it wasn't about their visa, that they were like visiting my family, screw weeks 3 and 4 or whatever, because I love my dog.
Yeah. Remember when Reggie subbed in for Bjergsen?
Yeah.
That's really strange.
I think that it's just dumb. So
I think it's a bigger issue than like the games or whatever, and I think a lot of people didn't really realize it. And I think we'll get flack from the community, so I'll let you guys respond to this. I think that the community will respond and say, what did you expect them to do? Should they have really said, Bjergsen, you can't play over here for many, many weeks while you wait for your visa?
Yes. And that's what they're going to do this year. Why? Because that's the right thing to do. Easy peasy. And you just, like, it's not like it wasn't a surprise rule. Like, again, different than some of the other things on our list, it wasn't a surprise rule. Nobody was shocked that you suddenly needed visas. This is something esports that's been skirting around for the history of esports. It's like, oh yes, I'm a tourist in San Francisco. Coincidentally, I have like a mouse and a keyboard, a bunch of other stuff, and there's a tournament going on. I'm just like a tourist. I'll be going to the Golden Gate Bridge or whatever. No, like, people have been coming in and competing on tourist visas forever. We've always known that it was a problem. At some point, it had to get better. Riot announced well in advance, like, this is a thing. You need to like respect this thing. Edward, in theory, you know, like, we went through this all, and Edward got a legit visa to come when he first came over, and then suddenly we were all like, well, whatever, I love Bjergsen, like, who cares about the rules? It's all, everything's great.
So if they don't enforce it, or if they, okay, let's say next year they enforce it,
right?
Isn't that going to affect the games even more? Because maybe we've had all these players that have been announced that are coming over, to play
I don't
on different
know.
teams, and then
Maybe, but if we're
It'll
righting a
definitely hurt.
wrong, if we're righting a wrong, then good. Like we have to rip this Band-Aid off and get through it at some point. We should have done it already, but let's just do it now. Let's just do it now. Do it now.
Wow.
What's next?
Impassion. So Hunter, you seem to not really care too much. And I did also put this as my least big deal about the Chinese analysts at Worlds. However, when I write the article, I will point out that like we had a lot of representation. Obviously, Monte Cristo could speak. Like the two best regions, undoubtedly, were China and Korea. As much as I want to say USA, and yet we had people who could speak with great authority on all of the regions except for the second best one. I think that was an issue that I hope that they solve next year. Hunter, you were so...
I don't think there's a counter argument. I agree. I just don't... ultimately, I don't really care. So, like, I agree. I think that was a mistake.
Yeah. Spellsy, you put this as number 2.
Yeah, because I didn't really think any of them were... Yeah, wait. I think I put it second lowest. What did I put lowest?
You put the LOL Worlds Fallout.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Because who really cared about that?
An entire region. This is so funny. You guys are so...
Whatever. Next.
As
What's
much
next?
crap as I get for being NA-centric. Like,
What's next?
It doesn't affect me. It's not a big deal at all. Even
it's
though,
personal opinion.
This was the biggest problem. Like, out of everything, this was, I think, the biggest fuck-up Riot made all year long. Not even just in esports. Like, this was their biggest failure.
Wow.
And I don't even know how it's arguable.
Shots fired. Take that, Riot. Travis Gafford is disappointed. Shame on you, Riot Games.
I'm saying it's the worst failure. Obviously, every year, everything has a worse failure because you're going to have something that was the worst. I think overall, this was a good year for Riot, as we discussed. I think Reddit thought it was maybe the worst year for Riot. But other than that, I think it was the best. But I think that this was the biggest failure.
Okay.
I mean, you did kind of convince me a little bit that it was more significant than I expected by saying, like, this is, like, one of the few things that Rise and Trinamere have commented on, and actually put out an apology. Like, that means it must be pretty significant.
Stand by.
I'm not, like, stubborn and unreasonable.
Okay, I guess what I think is there's a difference between, like, PR damage and, like, actual damage. And I think that's totally, like, a marketing PR thing. And in the long run, we just, like, forget about it. Nobody's going to remember that this was an issue or whatever. Whereas, like, that Gambit thing, people are going to be complaining about that forever.
Or the Season 2, like, delays or whatever in Worlds or whatever.
I can guarantee you that this will have done very, very big damage to, like, Koreans' relationship with Riot. From here on out, anytime their servers are lagging, people are going to say, like, Riot doesn't care about us as much. They only care about North America.
I know.
And it's true. Honestly, Riot should care most about North America because we're the best region.
And on that note, that wraps up the final edition for the year of the Roundtable. It's been a great year. I've really enjoyed doing the show and having you all with us and having you all with us. So
I was hoping you'd be, since you were kind of like the host of the show and also sort of in charge of so many things, that this was the part where you maybe give Spellsy and I a little bit of a...
I was just about to thank you on the way out. Thank you, Spellsy, for joining me on the show. It's been a wonderful year, I think, for OnGamers and for everybody, so thank you.
You're welcome. It's been exciting. Even though I might not be the best on-camera personality or whatever, I feel like being at OnGamers has been a great experience.
There you go. Travis, thank you, as always, for being on the Roundtable, humbling us, gracing us with your presence.
Or any kind of...
Wait, what? A gift card?
You
get like so much free RP from all your Riot friends. What do you need a gift card for?
Whoa, that's supposed to be like secret. You're not supposed
to. True. We'll edit it out if it is. So we'll check on that later. All right, that's it. Thanks everybody. We'll see you next week, next year. Woo! Adam brought it on the clap this week for real.
That's a spicy clap.
My doctor told me too. I hope that made it, because that's our Easter egg. End of the year, Adam's venereal diseases, and we're good. Okay, here we go.